Everybody. I'm going to start that again. I forgot about the recording. Thank you, everybody. And thank you for joining us today. I'm really excited to be here to share with you our Gate Plus program. And I just want to acknowledge and thank you for coming because I know it's such a busy time of year for teachers. I taught for 30 years in an elementary school, so I know how busy it is for you, not only in the spring, but year round, right? So I'm glad that you're here and you're joining us today. Gate Plus is really an amazing program for you to use with your young readers, and I think you're going to find it as a great curriculum option. So I'm going to get started. We're going to share with you the basics of the program, and let's begin. We will start with an overview, including how to plan and schedule Gate Plus into your day. Then we'll move into the research behind the program and talk about what materials are included and how you will use them with your students. And then finally, we'll talk about the instructional activities and the assessments that are built into the program to guide your instruction. So let's start with a brief overview. GATE Plus, or GATE, GATE is an acronym for Group and Tutoring Addition. The GATE Plus curriculum is implemented through teacher-directed instruction in either small groups, or you can also use it for an entire class of beginning readers. Through a combination of activities, GATE Plus explicitly teaches phonemic awareness, phonics and word recognition skills, fluency. It supports comprehension and vocabulary, and bringing in all of those areas really helps accelerate the reading achievement of both beginning and struggling readers. Students develop phonological awareness in GATE Plus by listening for specific sounds and syllables in words, segmenting words, and learning how to blend sounds and syllables to make words. Students develop their phonics skills by strengthening their proficiency with the letter sounds and letter combinations they are being taught, and by learning to decode both 1 and 2 syllable words. Through our Read Naturally strategy, which is a research-proven strategy to improve fluency, students will develop that fluency as they're working through those important steps of each lesson. Students will learn to read and spell both regular and irregular high-frequency words with automaticity. They'll get practice spelling short words that include the lesson's featured phonics patterns, as well as those regular and irregular high-frequency words that are taught in each lesson. And then as students work through the high-interest nonfiction stories that are built into the GATE Plus, they will expand their vocabulary. And GATE Plus also includes multiple components to support reading comprehension. There are activities built in for making predictions, answering questions, and writing sentences about what they remember from stories. So who can benefit from GATE Plus? Like, who is this program built for? Well, it can be used with beginning readers, or it can be used with students who are struggling to learn how to read. It works well as an intervention in grades 1 through 3, or like I said earlier, as classroom instruction for students in kindergarten through 1st grade. Another option for GATE Plus could also be to be using it as a precursor for Read Naturally Live if you want students to eventually be working in that, or in our Encore program. Those are the 2 programs where students will work more independently, where in GATE Plus it is much more teacher-directed. Thinking about how you're going to fit a program like GATE Plus into your curriculum, or into your day, I want you to I want you to understand each lesson is going to take about 4 30-minute sessions. So if you're building it into your core curriculum and you're using it with the classroom, you can plan on either doing 4 30-minute sessions each week or 5 20-minute sessions each week. And if you're doing it as an intervention, if you have a 20-minute block, you would want to do those 5 20-minute sessions. Or if you have a bit longer block, you can do each lesson in 4 30-minute sessions. The key here is to schedule GATE Plus lessons daily. Knowing one lesson is going to take those either 4 30-minute or 5 20-minute periods, but they are set up in a way so you and your students can complete as many parts of the lesson during your reading period as possible. And you just simply continue the lesson the next day when you start your reading session again. You also can begin a new lesson immediately upon finishing a lesson if you have time remaining in your reading period. So in the beginning, the first few lessons are going to take you a little bit longer because both you and the students are going to need some time to learn the behaviors that are required in each of the activities, and you'll kind of get a routine down. But once it's really flowing for both the students and the teacher, this is the approximate amount of time that you would be spending using the Gate Plus program. In the settings, like I said, it can be used as a classroom program in kindergarten through first grade. In a resource room, so either in a special education classroom, a Title I classroom, a reading interventionist classroom, it works really well there. Before or after school programs, and with summer right around the corner, this also would be a really good summer school program for your students who need extra support in learning to read. And it's also a great tool for those of you that are working in a tutoring setting. The levels of Gate Plus. So there's 3 levels in the program that I'm going to talk about. Level 0.8 is for your early to mid first grade readers, and the focus there is going to be on short vowels. Level 1.3 is going to be that mid first grade level reader with a focus on long vowels. And level 1.8, those will be your late first grade to early second grade level readers. And that's going to move into blends and digraphs, those inflected endings and 2-syllable words. Throughout all of those levels, however, both regular and irregular high frequency words are emphasized in each lesson. As a teacher, what you're going to do is you can use this table to help you select the appropriate level of Gate Plus for your students. You're going to want to look at point 8 for those of your students who know the letters of the alphabet. They have some knowledge of letter sounds, and they're able to recognize, 15 to 20 written words. Those kids would be ready for point 8 with that focus on the short vowels. And the reason they can do that is because Gate Plus builds in those important scaffolds of teacher modeling and repeated reading. And that enables your students to be successful with that teacher support when they face things that might be a bit more challenging for them. For your students who are good at those types of skills that exist in point 8, you might want to start them. Those are your early to mid first grade level readers. You might want to start them at 1.3. Again, in 1.3, you're going to be looking at the long vowels and continuing also with those regular and irregular high frequency words. And your mid to late first grade readers, you're just going to want to pop them into 1.8, where they're going to focus on those blends, digraphs, common suffixes, and inflected endings and 2-syllable words. As you become familiar with the text difficulty and the Gate Plus stories and the skills of each lesson, that's really going to help you select an appropriate level for the particular group of students that you're working with. The stories within each level are all going to have that similar text complexity. At Read Naturally, we use the Lexile measures and the Space and Fry readability formulas to determine the level for each story. And at each successive level, of course, the stories are going to become longer and a little bit more complex. So you're just going to want to make sure you group your students with similar needs together. Let's do a quick look at the scope and sequence. So here's a broad scope and sequence that shows the skills taught in Gate Plus, but let's just zoom in and look a little bit closer. You'll see across the top of the page, we've got our levels, 0.8, 1.3, and 1.8. As you look at this, the T under each category means this is where the skill is taught. The R is going to tell us what is being reviewed, and then the A is going to tell us what is applied. So you'll see the progression of skills as you move through each of the levels, through the consonants, short vowels, long vowels, blends and digraphs, endings, compound words, and of course, 2-syllable words. But then you'll notice at the bottom when you get to spelling, high frequency words, fluency, comprehension, those high interest nonfiction stories and vocabularies, those are all taught, reviewed, and applied throughout all levels of the program. So depending on the skill set of your students, you can also use this to help you look into and decide what would be the best level to work with your students on. So that's a brief overview. We're going to get more into depth about each of the instructional activities and the materials, but let's just first talk about the research behind the Gate Plus program. The Read Naturally strategy is Read Naturally's research-proven strategy for improving reading fluency. This is built into the GATE Plus program, and we combine teacher modeling, repeated reading, and progress monitoring, and all of those help students to improve their reading fluency. Let's talk about each of those. Teacher modeling is going to occur as the student actively reads along and mimics the teacher's phrasing and intonation. Teacher modeling teaches that important word recognition that the students need. Repeated reading is also built into sections of each lesson. And in repeated reading, the students will repeatedly read the same words in context, and they read them many times. That helps them begin to know and identify them in subsequent texts that they are reading. Repeated reading is that form of mastery learning that is shown to effectively help students grow in their reading. And then this important step of progress monitoring. I want to draw your eyes down to that graph that you see in the bottom corner of your screen. That's an example of a record sheet, and progress monitoring gives students a beautiful visual that they can use to see the growth that they are making. And on this record sheet, the students are going to be graphing, cold timing, which you see there in blue. That's the first time they've ever read a story. It kind of sets the baseline for progress monitoring. And then the final time they read a story for each lesson, that's going to be graphed there in red, which just provides a really nice visual for the students to see the growth that they've made by following the Read Naturally strategy, and for the teacher to get a good idea of the growth that the students made. And I know back when I was teaching and we would fill out graphs like these, the students loved seeing their improvement. It really caused them to be more motivated to keep reading, and they always wanted to share, right? They wanted to share their graph with their friends and with their teacher and with their parents. So it's an important step that we know makes a difference in a student's ability to continue to make growth. So Read Naturally strategy is built into some important steps in our program, which we're going to talk about in a minute. I also want to draw your attention to our foundational skills white paper, and Chrissy's going to drop a link to this paper in the chat. And this is just a really good resource. This foundational skills white paper outlines the importance of implementing instruction in 4 areas, those foundational skill areas of print concepts, phonological awareness, phonics and word recognition, and fluency. And it also will explain how programs like GATE Plus can support teachers with these skills as they work with those beginning and developing readers. This is a great resource for anybody who's teaching reading. It's a great resource for curriculum directors. It's something you can share with your folks that are doing that important work of teaching our youngest kiddos how to read. And literacy coaches, instructional coaches. It's just a really great, nice read to get a handle on those important foundational reading skills. So we've talked about what is GATE Plus, we've talked about the research, but now let's really get into the material so you can see what is needed to teach a GATE Plus lesson. To set up the program, you'll need to prepare your materials and then select your setting, but we also want to talk a little more in depth about those materials. So GATE Plus is a scripted program, and you can see it's really tiny, but up here on your screen is a sample of what the script looks like. But we've also are sharing with you some sample lessons. So when you access those sample lessons, you'll see a full size copy of a script that is included. The teacher script in the flip book, which you can see down here in the left corner, this is the flip book that will sit on the table that your students will have their student-facing pages of what they're looking at. And then, of course, your teacher script is on the other side facing you. That is how our flip book works. But then I also want to point out that each of the levels comes with its own USB drive, and included in the USB drive, in addition to many exciting materials that will help enhance the program, is a PowerPoint slide show. It's a PowerPoint slideshow that goes with each lesson. And so if you're teaching with a larger group or you want to project those student-facing pages onto a screen, you will have access and the ability to do that in your setting. So that's just a quick look at some of those key materials that you need to teach a lesson, but I'm going to turn it over. I'm going to play a video of our colleague, Maddie, who's going to do an unboxing to show you everything that comes with a GATE Plus order.
Hi everyone, and welcome to the Read Naturally Warehouse. We are really excited today because our first batch of Gate Plus has arrived from the printer, so we just wanted to do a quick walkthrough video for y'all so you can see what's included in your Gate Plus order. We have 3 levels available for Gate Plus, targeting short vowels, long vowels, and blends and digraphs. Each level also includes lessons for learning how to read and spell irregular high-frequency words. Today we're just going to be walking through our Point 8 materials as an example, but know that all 3 levels are structured the same way and include the same resources, which are the lesson flipbook, the teacher's manual, and a USB drive in the spiral binding. Let's take this over to my office and I'll show you everything you need to get Gate Plus set up in your classroom. First up, we have our teacher's manual. This has all the program information and instructions that you'll need, and it also includes a lesson sample with a description, rationale, script, and even specific suggestions for each activity. There's also a digital file of this available on your handy-dandy USB drive if you do prefer to access it on your computer. There are also a lot of other important resources on this USB drive, but we'll come back to those in just a minute. Up next, we have the star of the show, our lesson flipbook. So your lesson flipbook props up on the table super easy like this, and it is ready to use right out of the box. For those of you who may remember Gate, you'll notice that Gate Plus has a new fresh look and name to reflect the significant enhancements we've made with this new version. When you open it up, you've got your table of contents, and then you'll notice 2 types of pages. On this side of the lesson flipbook, you've got your student display pages, which you'll just face toward your students if you're working in a small group. The other side is for you, and it's got your complete teacher script, all color-coded and super easy to follow. So again, if you're working in that small group, you've got your students around you or in front of you, and they can just follow along easily as you flip through the lesson. Now, I'll elaborate on this in just a second. But if you are working with a larger group or perhaps a whole class, these student-facing pages are available on a slideshow presentation, in which case you would project these pages on a larger screen to your whole group, but you would still read from your teacher's script in the lesson flipbook. Let's circle back now to this small but significant component of your Gate Plus toolkit, your USB drive. You'll want to plug this into your computer to get all your files downloaded right away because there are so many useful resources on here. When you open the file, you'll see all these different lesson folders, which make it super easy to find the materials you need to go along with whatever lesson you're working in on a particular day. Right away, I want you to notice the README file at the top. This is a great place to start to familiarize yourself with everything you'll find on the drive. Under the README file, you'll see this folder called Additional Materials. This is where you'll find a number of incredibly helpful resources, including additional student activities like bonus word lists, crossword puzzles, and graphic organizers. There's also a comprehension builder with several lesson plans and useful tips. Plus, there's a great reader award certificate, a high-frequency word assessment, a parent letter, progress monitoring tools, a pronunciation guide, your digital teacher's manual, and so much more. A lot of these resources are really great for differentiating and tailoring instruction to the individual needs of each of your students. They're also great for working in some additional student accountability and progress monitoring, so please do check these out as you're getting ready to teach. Coming back out now to the main folder is again where you'll find the resources for each particular lesson. Within each lesson folder, you'll find a few things, but most importantly, the student booklets that correspond with each lesson. These should be printed front and back before each lesson, so you can fold them into these nice little booklets for each student to use throughout the lesson. You'll notice we've got sound boxes, word lists, decodable sentences, spell out and sound out practice, connected nonfiction text, and comprehension questions, all packed into one powerful little booklet. These are fantastic to send home with your students or to pull out at parent-teacher conferences to show your students' parents some of their work and also to highlight that explicit systematic literacy instruction that you're working on in class. In this folder, we also have that slideshow I mentioned in case you're working with a larger group or a whole classroom. In this case, you'd still be using the teacher script from your lesson flipbook for yourself, but this way you'd be able to display these student pages on a larger screen. Now, the slides are almost exactly the same as the student-facing pages from your lesson flipbook, but there are a few additional slides which are noted for you in your teacher script, so there's no guessing on your end about when to transition to the next slide. Clearly, I could go on and on all day about this program, but I really don't want to keep you because if we know one thing about teachers, it's that you are busy. So if you have any questions about getting started with Gate Plus, please don't hesitate to reach out. You can leave a comment on this video, send us an email, or give us a call. Our customer service team is phenomenal, and a real person will pick up the phone ready to help you however they can.
Okay, so as you can see, there's a large number of amazing materials that are included to help you successfully teach Gate Plus. Let's zero in real quick on an example of the student booklet. If you remember correctly, or if you remember, Maddie had showed how you print out those student booklets back to back, and then you'll fold them in half. This is just the front page of a sample student booklet, and I believe there is an example of this included in the sample materials that Christy has shared with you in the chat. But as you see on the cover page, we've got this important set of sound boxes. This is where we're teaching some phonemic awareness skills with our students. Here's an example of the word list as the students practice reading the word lists that are focused on the featured sound of the lesson, as well as the regular and irregular high frequency words that have been taught. The inside of the booklet is where you're going to find decodable sentences. You've got spelling activities in there, along with the story that you'll be reading. And then at the back side is going to be where we wrap up with the comprehension activities and the optional section where you can work with the students in writing a sentence about the story. Here's an example of the story record sheet that we use. It's probably a little bit difficult for you to see, but if you've given your students a goal of, how many words correct per minute do you want them to reach on their stories, you can you or the students can document that. They'll document their cold score and of course color that in blue to get that great visual of what was their first reading like. They'll do their final score and they'll color that in red, and you can imagine once they've completed a number of stories what a great visual this is for them. You'll mark the comprehension score. We really want students to remember too, the point of reading is reading for meaning, so we document that comprehension score. If the teacher has sat with the student during one of those readings, the teacher will document the score that they came up with. And then we also score the students on their reading expression because we want them to also be paying attention to that important part of reading aloud. In addition to story record sheets, the teachers can choose to also use what are called the numbered word lists. I think those were also shown in the video that Maddie was demonstrating. We've got numbered word lists that are found on that USB drive. So if you want to start having your students document how many words they're reading correctly on the word list, that will be an option, and there is a record sheet you can use for that. Some other additional materials when you're teaching a lesson, you don't need a lot, but you're going to need one digital timer. Just you as the teacher will use that as you time your group of students as they're reading. We've got red and blue colored pencils available for you to purchase, or you can use red or blue pencils that you have in your classroom or crayons, but it's important that those students use those two colors to monitor and document their growth on the graph. And then it's really helpful if each of your students has a folder where just all of their Gate Plus materials are housed. And I know we've all had those students, right, who they don't keep anything in their folder. But if you can get the majority of your students to keep all their things in the folder, it makes it really easy to not be spending time during your reading intervention block or your reading block in your classroom, finding all of the things that the students need to complete a lesson. I want to go back to that USB drive really quick and just kind of highlight, here's an example of a vocabulary or a crossword puzzle. And these are good for your students because it helps them become more confident with the vocabulary that they're working on in their stories of the Gate Plus lessons. But there's those numbered word lists I talked about. There's bonus word lists. So you might have kids that need a little bit more of a challenge, or maybe they need a little more practice, but you can print out extra word lists to have them practice that featured phonics pattern that you're working on. We have a comprehension builder that is downloadable that can be taught to either a small group or a large group of students. The comprehension builder teaches those important skills and strategies that's good that readers should use before they start to read, during the reading that they're doing, and then after they are done reading. So that's a great resource provided for you. We've got those awards that Maddie showed. We've got letters you can send home to show your parents what the students are working on, and then some nice graphic organizers when your students are ready to independently write their predictions, or possibly you even want them working on a retelling, those organizers are available for you on that USB drive. So now let's get into the heart of it. You know what the program is. You've heard about the research of the Read Naturally strategy, and we've seen the video of the materials that are included. Let's get into, we'll spend the rest of our time talking about the important instructional activities and assessments that are built into Gate Plus. As I go through each of these activities, I want you to remember that all of them are built into every lesson at point 8, at 1.3, and at 1.8. They, of course, go up in difficulty as you move from short vowels to long vowels to then the blends and the digraphs and all of the things that are presented at 1.8. But each of the activities is built in. The first set of activities all promote phonemic awareness, okay? In particular, they're focused on the ability to recognize the featured sounds in each word. At levels 0.8 and 1.3, students are going to be listening for vowel sounds. As soon as they get into level 1.8, that's when they'll start listening for blends and digraphs, inflected endings, compound and two-syllable words. Phonemic awareness is developed in these activities as the teacher tells the students the sound of the featured letter or letters, and then asks the students to repeat that sound for them. Then what the teacher moves into is saying a word that contains or doesn't contain the featured sound. And then the students will listen for and decide if the word the teacher said has the featured sound in it. The next activity that supports phonemic awareness, in particular the ability to recognize words made by sounds or word parts blended together. The teacher will be blending letter sounds or word parts slowly to make a word, while the students, of course, are listening carefully to determine what word their teacher is saying. Then the students will say the word in unison. And then finally, our segmenting activity. And this is when the teacher will say a word and the students will mark the number of sounds that they heard in the word in those sound boxes, which you saw on the front page of that student booklet. So those are the great, excellent phonemic awareness activities built into each lesson. Next, the students begin working to improve their phonics skills. Phonics skills are developed through the direct instruction of the sound of the letter or the letters that are being taught. The teacher works through the lesson pointing to each letter or combination, telling the students the name or the sound of the letter. The students repeat the sound in unison, and they continue to do this step with teacher support at first by repeating the sound of each letter or combination after the teacher models them. But eventually, our students will say the sound of each letter or combination without that teacher modeling. So, it's that I do it, we do it, and then you're going to do it approach. Students continue to develop their phonics and word recognition skills. They'll learn how to decode phonetically regular words that contain that featured sound, and we call these the sound out words because they are decodable. And many of these words are also high frequency words. So if I can just draw your attention down to the right corner here, those decodable words are going to be found in the demonstration pages at the top. If a word is red, that means it is a high frequency word, and that's how the students will notice that when they're working through each lesson. So the top is going to be those sound out words. The words at the bottom are going to be the irregular high frequency words. This is when students are taught a strategy for learning the phonetically irregular high frequency words. Students are first taught they're first taught the regular parts of the words that they can sound out, and then they'll be taught the irregular parts that they need to learn by heart. We call these the spell out words because students cannot completely decode them by spelling them out. Students then practice word lists, and you can see an image of the word list down there below, and you also saw an image of that when you were looking at the student booklet. But when they're practicing the word list, the students first read the words down, and then they read them across, and this allows students to build automaticity. And you'll see in that last column there, that is where the high frequency words are going to be built into each part of the word list activity. So those are just some of the instructional activities. We're going to stop and do just a little review before we move on to the rest of them. But let's just take a second and review these first. If you remember the components of reading instruction that Gate Plus incorporates, I want you to think, if we're talking about the activities of listening for vowel sounds in words and the activity where they blend sounds into words, which component of reading instruction do those two activities support? Is it phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, or comprehension? If you're following along in your handout, you can go ahead and circle the answer if you'd like. But if you said phonemic awareness, you are correct, because when we ask our students to listen for those vowel sounds in words and blend those vowel sounds into words, we are supporting phonemic awareness. Let's try another one. When we ask our students to practice letter sounds, decode sound out words, and read spell out words, which component of reading instruction are we supporting? If you said phonics, you are correct. Those activities built into the program all support the reading instruction, the phonics reading instruction component. So let's get back into our instructional activities because there are more. And like I said, remember, these are built into every lesson at every level. Decodable sentences. We know that these are important. Students read the decodable sentences, which are made up of words and sounds that they've learned in both the current lesson that they are or that you are teaching and previous lessons, okay? This step provides practice reading connected text with the featured phonics patterns. And as you see in the display there up on the left side of your screen, the high frequency words, of course, are in red because we're emphasizing that those are high frequency words, and then the other words are going to be the decodable words. We have a spelling step built in, and during the spelling step, students will practice both writing the spell out words and the sound out words. The visual on your screen is showing you the sound out words, but they do those spell out words as well. Spelling is a step that develops phonemic awareness. It gives students practice writing short words with that featured phonics pattern, as well as practice with those irregular high frequency words. And all of this works on improving their spelling skills. After the spelling activity, the students move into the story step. The stories are all authentic text, so it gives students the opportunity to apply those decoding skills that they've learned and practice them in sentences in the authentic text, which we know is so important. The stories are very decodable and they give kids practice, which lead to fluency. And it's important we get our students reading meaningful text when they are ready for it. And the beautiful part about this is that the student can provide the necessary supports for your students to be successful. When the students work on the story, they work on developing their comprehension skills. So we start by having them write a prediction about the story based on the keywords. So you're going to see the keywords here in this little box. For the rat story, the keywords are PAX, lab, and TAN. The keywords will be described to the student using student-friendly definitions along with the sentence to share with your students. It's this pre-reading activity that's going to prepare your students to read the story, and it reminds them again, they are reading for information. So the teacher and the students work together and they decide on that prediction using the picture, the title, and the keywords of the story to help them. The teacher will write that prediction sentence on a surface that the students can see well. You might remember we talked about on that USB drive, there is a graphic organizer available. So when you feel that your students are ready to write their own predictions, you can go ahead and print that out and give them an opportunity to write their predictions. And they can even share those, of course, with the group. Next, the students are going to work on improving their fluency skills. So before the students read the story along with the teacher or do their independent practice, this is when they'll do first their cold reading of the story for 1 minute. Each student is going to read individually as the teacher times the group. Now, important to note, the students are not silent reading. They are reading aloud, but they're also not reading in unison. So this is part of learning the routine of the lesson where your students are going to learn to quietly read aloud to themselves. At this point in time, the teacher's just going to, sit down with one student or stand next to one student and listen to them read while all the other students are reading. You will encourage your students to simply underline words that they do not know. And it's this cold reading that sets that baseline for measuring improvement and that progress monitoring. Once you get through that first cold reading for 1 minute, your students will record and graph their individual cold timing scores in blue. The teacher's manual gives you very specific directions on how to teach your students to count their words and then guide them in making that graph. And now they've got that visual representation, right, of what their timing was at the beginning of the story. Students then continue to work on fluency as they complete that read along step with the teacher. This is that important teacher modeling step. Teacher modeling is going to support your students so they can learn those new words, confirm those difficult words. Remember, we asked them to underline the words that they didn't know. This is the opportunity now to teach those words to the students, and also mastering those high frequency words. This activity also models appropriate phrasing, of course, and expression for your students. And the teacher and students will start by first reading the story together aloud, either from those student-facing pages in the flipbook, or if you're projecting with the PowerPoint slide from the screen. It's important the teacher reads slowly enough so the students can actually read along, that the teacher pauses to decode words with the students. When they get to the second read alongs, you're going to do this more than once with your students. The students are going to read aloud from their booklet. So they'll take out their booklets and you'll teach them how to point to and read each of the words. During this step, the teacher always reads along with them, okay? And then the students continue reading along as many times as the teacher determines is necessary. Most teachers are going to do it at least 3 times with your students. Then the students will continue to work on their fluency. During this next step, the teacher times the entire group of students for 1 minute, and the teacher will just listen to one student read while the others are quietly reading aloud independently. The teacher will continue timing students in this way, each time, listening to a different student read. And we'll continue this process for 4 to 6 timings. We'll let the teacher just gets to decide how many times they need to do this important step of repeated practice. When the teacher decides this is going to be the final timing, the students will count their words now. How far did they read during the final timing? They will score it, and they will go record that final timing score in red on that graph. And this again gives our students the opportunity to monitor their progress. And then the last instructional activity is when our students answer questions about the story. This activity is important because it encourages students to remember what they have read, reminds them that they are reading for meaning, and it helps to support their phonics development because students are given the opportunity to write words with the featured phonics patterns as they work to answer each of the questions. This activity also assesses student comprehension of the story. In the beginning, you as the teacher will likely complete that step together as a group with your students, and eventually you'll release that responsibility to have your students do that activity independently. And then, of course, we have that optional step where students will write a sentence about the story. They'll continue to work on their comprehension by just simply in the beginning writing about something they remember from the story. You could also start by doing that activity as a group, and then as students become more competent, of course, you can release that responsibility and have them doing it independently. That section is also an optional activity because if it's taking you too much time to complete a lesson because of this step, you just might want to wait until your students are more ready to complete that with you and then independently, efficiently. Lots of activities we talked about. Those are all of them that are included in each lesson. So let's do a quick review again, but let's switch our review up. This time I'm going to give you the answer. You give me the question, kind of like Jeopardy. The answer is this Gate Plus activity supports student comprehension. It is a pre-reading activity that prepares the students to read the story. What is the question? If you said, what is making a prediction, you are correct. That pre-reading activity, it starts working on comprehension. Let's review again. When the students are asked to read the word list and do the spelling activity, those 2 activities support which component of reading instruction? If you said phonics, you are correct. When they read that word list and they finish this or they complete the spelling activity, they are being supported in their phonics. Let's try another one where I give you the answer. The answer is these Gate Plus activities support fluency development. Together, they incorporate Read Naturally's research-proven strategy of teacher modeling, repeated reading, and progress monitoring. And what is the question? What are cold timing, reading along with the teacher, and practicing and passing the story? Finally, here's a multiple choice question. Answering the questions and writing a sentence about the story support which component of reading instruction? And if you said comprehension, you are correct. So let's jump briefly into assessments, okay? When you are using Gate Plus to support your beginning reading development for your students, including students who might be in a response to intervention or MTSS model. We know you're going to want to conduct periodic diagnostic phonics assessments or complete some sort of a phonics skills checklist, right? We need to know where our students are at. And so you possibly already have access to a phonics assessment that your school uses. But if you don't, we have available a quick phonics screener. This was created by Dr. Jan Hasbrook. It's a diagnostic phonics assessment that you can use to help confirm that your students who are working in Gate Plus are mastering phonics skills as they move through the program. The information you glean from this assessment will help you decide if you need to make adjustments in your student instruction. And it will also help you determine when a student no longer needs support of Gate Plus, or maybe they're ready to move into Read Naturally Live or Encore where they can work a little bit more independently. There are also suggestions for adjusting Gate Plus instruction found in the teacher's manual. So there's lots of things you can use to inform the instruction that you are providing. Included with Gate Plus are some important assessments. We have a Gate Plus progress check, which is an assessment that you give to all of your students. You'll give this after each set of 3 to 5 lessons, depending where you're at in the program, and this will help confirm student mastery of the letters and the sounds that have been taught. Each student records the results on their progress checks on a record sheet, and then the teacher directions and assessments are just found on the USB drive, which you'll obviously are going to be getting in your Gate Plus package. So that is a nice way to progress check to see if your students are getting the skills that you have been teaching to them. And then finally, it's important that we assess their development and their ability to learn and remember those important high frequency words. So we have a high frequency word assessment that you can use to assess each student's progress in mastering the words that have been explicitly taught at each level. This assessment also is found on the USB drive, and you'll notice when you look at it that it is a cumulative assessment. So you can go back and reassess the words that have been previously taught and assess to make sure that your students have mastered and continue to remember the words that you have taught. All right, we are running out of time, so I'm not going to be able to show you this quick video, but this is available on our website. It just kind of sums up the activities that students do in GATE, but let's just go ahead. Today, we've covered an overview of the program. We talked about the research. You saw all the materials that are included, and we went into great length on the instructional activities and the assessments that are built into the program. If you had any questions, I want you to know that we will email you today because we won't have time now to get to them, but we will email you with the answers to your questions. And if, let's say you think about a question a day or two from now and you really want to know, don't hesitate to reach out. You can reach out to our customer service. I encourage you to feel free to email me. Like Maddie said, a real person answers the phone at Read Naturally, so somebody will pick up and give you the assistance that you need. So thank you again for taking some time to spend with us today. Please respond at the end of this. Please respond to the survey questions that appear on your screen after the webinar. We will use those to continue to improve the educational experience for all of you that attend and watch, and for future webinars that we are going to be creating and presenting. So I appreciate your time today, and I wish you all a wonderful afternoon. Thank you.